will be coming. I am not committing the date because we are planning a very major survey, and we are how to do it and all that we are discussing. But it will be around women's employment. And many of the people in the team advisory committee uh, are here. Uh, so I'm just listing is that ISD major trust, one of the major trust is gender issues. Friends, uh, uh, we have a very formidable panel. The book release will be over in maybe 15, 20 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And we are very happy, grateful to the people, Dr. Shiv Kumar, uh, uh, Mrs. Rina Zabwala, Dr. Farzana Afridi, uh, uh, Dr. Farzana Afridi is a very well-known labor economist. Mrs. Zabwala, a very well-known social activist and champion of informal workers. Dr. Rasmi Singh, with whom ISD has worked for the last 25 years or so. We know her dynamism, and she is in charge of several things. Mrs. Anjali Rawat, I don't know whether she has arrived, she will be coming. She is Deputy Director General of Employment, Ministry of Labour and Employment, and Dr. Soumya Kapoor Mehta from World Bank, with whom also we have worked. So this is a very formidable panel. So I thank all of you, the moderator, the panelists, and all of you being here. And Bandana, thank you very much for being here. She has especially come from Itanagar, and especially I thank you also for organizing this seminar in Itanagar. Maybe we will do some joint activities together in future also. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sharma. I now request Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta to present the highlights of the book. Yes. Professor Mehta is the chairperson of the Center for Gender Studies at ISD. He is a distinguished economist with deep expertise in gender, poverty, and development. She has played a key role, we must mention this, in coordinating the publication of this book in a fast-track mode. Ma'am, here it is.
Thank you very much.
You take 15 minutes.
Yes, I will. Thank you so much, Shiv. This is really a book that's been written by 40 authors and there are 24 chapters. And what we're going to present is going to highlight some of the analysis and findings in the context of measurement of women's work, time use studies, trends and patterns in employment and work, discrimination, care, motherhood, care penalties and gender responsive care, women workers in the platform economy and global value chains, education and employment, and policy issues and perspectives also in all the above. Now, in the context of measurement of women's work, there are 3 chapters that have been written on this in the book. But, I want to draw your attention to firstly this slide, in which you can see that when you measure women's work, you get very large differences across surveys. So there's a substantial variation in FWPR estimates from 4 data sets, with estimates of rural FWPR from the IHDS survey showing twice as much participation of women as compared with that from EUSLB. Now, you also see very large gender gaps in the more recent PLFS data on labor force participation and of males and females. And if you look at column number 3 and column number 5, and you compare those with column number 2 and column number 3, column number 2 and column number 4, what you'll see is that as far as rural males are concerned, you get more than 70% of rural males in the labor force, regardless of what year you pick. It goes up, but it's well above 70, 75. The same thing with urban males. It's more than 75% all the way through. Whereas when you look at the contribution or the participation of rural females, you're getting numbers like 24.6% and now more recently 41.5%. The same thing with urban females. It goes from 20%, and now it's reflected or recorded as 25.4%. Now, when you disaggregate this data, because the data is built from information that's been collected at the level of the states and UTs. Now, what you get is this massive variation in what is reported from different states and union territories as women's participation. In particular, I'd like you to look at the number for Bihar, rural females labor force participation rate, which is in the third column. And I'll talk more about it in a second. Because despite improvements, FWPR and FLFPR underreport women's work. Since at least the 1970s, there's this huge literature that started with Nirmala Banerjee, Devaki Jain and Malini Chand, Beena Agarwal, Gail Omvet, and then Maitri Krishnaraj, Amita, Janine Rogers, Rupinder, Ratna, Prem Chowdhury. I'd done some work and so on, all of which has been pointing out that there are serious inaccuracies in the recording of work contributed by women. Now, I'll draw your attention back to the earlier slide, where the official estimates of FLFPR in rural Bihar was just 4% for 2018-19, and this is very problematic. Subsequently, the female labor force participation rate for rural Bihar was reported to be 32% in 2023-24. There are some seats available here, please, for those who are standing at the back. You can just come through, and there are seats available. Now, Janine Rogers found substantially higher estimates for Bihar for an earlier year. Now, one problem that underlies this massive variation in the data that we collect is this problem of wo kuch nahi karti, because the data is very often taken as reported. And this wo kuch nahi karti syndrome is a problem because the head of the household says the woman does nothing. Everyone in the family says she does nothing. And she internalizes it and she also says, I do nothing. At the end of this, what you get is the kind of numbers that I showed you, this 4% and 20% and so on. And that's a huge problem because how we measure depends on the skills of the investigator who's administering the questionnaire, what questions are asked, whether we use probing questions or not, who in the household answers work-related questions. All of that determines the kind of answers we get. And the hassle is that this then gets reflected in national and international documents as women in India don't really work. And if only they worked, our GDP would go up. And that is where the problem lies. Now, and this low workforce participation of women or labor force participation of women is unfair to women. Now, there's an IHD PPS survey that was conducted that covered about 10,173 households conducted in Delhi in 2021-22. And that estimated the female labor force participation rate to be 3 times and the workforce participation rate to be twice that estimated by the PLFS. Now, the IHD PPS survey also showed that 1 in 5 women who were not working wanted to work. So there's another pilot that was done by CWDS in Haryana, which we'll talk about under time use studies. And that also shows far higher estimates than does the PLFS. So therefore, in order to minimize this problem of underestimation of female workforce participation, it will be useful if the EUS, NSS, PLFS, whoever's collecting the data asks probing questions about participation of women in economic activities, and even whether they're working with pay or without pay. And before they ask the direct question on activity status, probing questions should be asked. And there's a long list of things that we've listed in the book regarding what can be done in this regard. In addition, refinements are needed in the method of stratification of households, and there's need for an appropriate increase in the sample size, at least in some of the states and UTs. Additionally, if we want to value women's work in unpaid domestic and caregiving services, then PLFS questionnaires must have inbuilt provisions to derive hourly wage rates for the female regular wage workers and casual laborers who are performing domestic and caregiving activities. We have 4 papers on time use studies and special geographies. And what they found, the time use studies, are also an extremely important source of data, but their usefulness depends on the quality and accuracy of the data that gets collected. So an analysis of the findings of the 2 all India time use surveys that have been conducted so far suggests that significant improvements are needed in the method of data collection. This is what's reported in one of the chapters in this section. And alignment with global concepts and categories of work will be useful. Data from the CWDS LFS TUS pilot, that's a time use study pilot that was conducted in Haryana recently by Neeta and Indrani, showed that FWPR estimates from the LFS TUS pilot are far, far higher than what is estimated from the PLFS 2021 data. They get double the participation rates in rural areas for Haryana and significantly higher participation for urban areas of Haryana. Agriculture remains a very key area in the undercounting of women workers, but there are also other areas such as women home-based workers that are significantly undercounted as well. And I'm sure Renana Jhabvala will speak to this. Analysis of data from time use studies in the Indian Himalayan region reflect the central but often invisible role of women in sustaining household economies. TUS findings corroborate the underestimation of women's work that we found in our micro studies, and time use patterns in the Northeast show that participation in household production and self-employment go hand in hand with wage labor arrangements. Better collection of time use data is possible with the use of 3 different schedules: a household schedule, an LFS schedule, and a TUS schedule, and the use of computer-assisted personal interviewing, which don't allow you to skip questions and move forward. In addition, in the context of the national TUS, about 40% of respondents did not report their own time use. This proxy-based data collection cannot be allowed. It is important that the time that is spent by respondents is recorded in actual minutes, and to enable recall, the interviewer should visit the respondent twice a day. The codes can also be designed more carefully. And there are several other points which I'll skip, but as de facto and informal privatization of the commons is underway, the state must intervene to protect the rights of all members, including women and other marginalized groups. Now, there are 3 chapters on trends and patterns in employment and work. And the findings from these 3 chapters tell us that India's FLFPR for 15 plus years of age fell steadily from 44.7% in 1983 to just 23.3% in 2018. It then rose sharply to 41.7% by 2024. And then between 2018 to 2024, women were the main drivers of growth in LFPR because there was a dramatic shift in the dynamics of the labor market, with women comprising 70% of the persons who joined the labor force. This was mainly because of the increase in rural female labor force participation rate, driven by economic necessity rather than choice, but we'll break that down. And in 2024, 67.4% of women workers were self-employed, 16.7% were in casual work, 15.9% were in only 15.9% were in regular salaried jobs. Most self-employed women were unpaid family workers, followed by 43.9% who were own account workers. Only 1% were employers. During 2018-24, the majority of additional employment created was in agriculture, followed by manufacturing, with just 8.6%, and services with just 8.5%, construction with 3%, but agriculture was about almost 80%. The nature of self-employment differs between economically more developed and less developed regions, and this is critical because then what Bidisha, Shona, etc. found was that self-employment in more developed regions is opportunity-driven. Self-employment in less developed regions is distress-driven, because it's leading to lower earnings. And higher share of women engaged as unpaid family workers, higher share in agricultural activities, falling share of regular opportunities, with relatively more developed regions offering more remunerative non-farm demand-side opportunities. Now, what comes through from the work that Professor Sharma and Balwant have done, as well as from the work that that Professor Goldar and Professor Agarwal have done, and also from Bidisha and Shona, etc.'s work, is that enhancing capabilities, freeing up time from domestic work, enabling digital inclusion are critical for increasing female labor force participation, and this requires more responsive, data-informed, women-centric interventions. Promoting home-based livelihoods and access to finance may help increase women's employment in manufacturing, trade, and services. For educated women, it's basically the need for career counseling, workplace flexibility, job-linked skill training, and urban safety that are key. For women who are in home-based enterprises, supportive ecosystems, including skilling, digital literacy, finance, markets are vital and underdeveloped. Access of female youth to technical education in rural areas will significantly increase female workforce participation, and priority sectors like pharmaceuticals, retail, domestic services, social work have potential for better employment opportunities for women. We need to address lack of gender sensitivity in workplace infrastructure, such as lack of toilets or childcare facilities or lack of flexible work arrangements. We need to address issues of harassment in public spaces and unreliable transport, last mile connectivity, all of which are significant deterrents. We looked at, there are 2 chapters on discrimination and inequality by Professor Das and Professors Nisha Srivastava and Rahul Ranjan. And what they found was that gender disparities in the labor market can't be addressed without understanding the deep-rooted and the persistent social discrimination that underlie it. There's strong evidence of gender and social group-based discrimination in wages and employment opportunities. Women are often concentrated in low-paid manual jobs, including even when they are employed in government employment. SC and ST women have historically exhibited higher levels of workforce participation than women from other castes, but they are primarily concentrated in casual, insecure, and low-paid employment. Regular employment with more secure salaried positions is dominated by other castes, although there are a few SC and ST women in regular employment. So therefore, if jobs which provide social security benefits are considered job-rich and others as job-poor, then there are gender disparities, with women lagging behind in both job-rich and job-poor jobs. Now, apart from discrimination in access to jobs with social security, there's gap in wages between men and women, and that is substantial. Employment policies must emphasize formalization of contracts and provision of social security in low-end sectors, and there's a lot more on this when we talk about platform workers and global value chains. Policies that aim at universal coverage are likely to reach the most deprived workers that are engaged in unpaid work and self-employment. So therefore, universal coverage is what we need to push for. And improved access to education, vocational training, enforcing labor protection, etc., are all important interventions. But the challenge is to ensure that the structure of employment itself becomes more inclusive and more equitable. There are 2 papers that speak directly to motherhood and care penalties, and following on that, gender responsive cares. That's Anupama Uppal and Amandeep did the paper on motherhood penalty, and Sri Rupa, Janvi, and Tanisha worked on care models and gender responsive care. Now, when you look at motherhood and care responsibilities, analysis based on PLFS data shows that women with childcare responsibilities bear greater penalty than those without any care responsibility, especially when there's no elder person in the house. And more than 70% of women in households with childcare responsibilities said they have to stay out of the labor market because of these responsibilities. A motherhood penalty in wages is lowest for women who have regular jobs. Access to affordable and quality care services directly affect women's employment outcomes. Care provisioning must be embedded in national development priorities to transform it from a private burden into a collective responsibility. Care solutions must be diverse, flexible, responsive to local context. So for example, if informal women workers can't afford a weekly break, we need Anganwadi centers that are open 7 days a week. And since Rashmi is Secretary, Women and Child Development, maybe you'd like to take that on board. Similarly, since there are others, who provided childcare for migrant workers at their destination sites, having creches starting early in the morning is very helpful. If you can offer safe and secure childcare spaces late into the night, that again is very helpful, especially for sex workers. So when you're talking about universal care, then universal care must include not just childcare, but go beyond early childhood to include after-school care and integrate disability care and elderly care to create a holistic care economy. We need to recognize care needs across the life course and respond to the lived realities of women who are simultaneously responsible for children, dependent family members, and also do household labor. We have 2 papers on platform economy and global value chains. So we've got Anvesha talking about platform work, and Devnathan, Rahul, Shikha, and Govind talking about gender inequality and monopsony capitalism. And in the context of this, urban India has seen exponential growth of the platform economy, as all of us who use gig workers are fully aware. Platforms are monopsonies that use algorithmic controls to manage task distribution, incentives, wait time, and income earned by the platform worker. Payment of social security benefits is avoided by platforms by using terms like independent contractor instead of using the term worker or employee. Flexibility is combined with income volatility, lack of payment for waiting time. There's power and information asymmetry as delivery platforms collect all the personal data. Everybody wants Aadhaar cards, and regulating it remains an issue. Okay. So global value chains exploit women's labor market vulnerability and disadvantages to cut costs through discriminatory hiring, contracting practices, wage suppression, gender-based violence and harassment, and compulsory overtime and overuse and discard practices. This has ramifications for the health and well-being of millions of women workers, and the gendered implications of power and information asymmetry are inherent in these situations that make it a very strong case for regulation in order to safeguard workers' rights. Manufacturers, delivery platforms, and global brands have to be held accountable for cost-cutting practices that lead to discrimination. Collective bargaining and trade union rights for women workers must be strengthened, and labor protection and social security protection must be enforced in what are usually informal contracts. Gender-based violence and harassment needs to be addressed as a disciplinary mechanism and not an isolated, we'll deal with it, in the background kind of misconduct. A robust social protection safety net is important for women, especially those from marginalized communities, and platform workers must be recognized as employees and must be included in the POSH Act. And gender-specific and intentional regulation and policies must be implemented on minimum wages, work hours, social protection, violence, et cetera, and this ambiguity around classification of contract work needs to be removed, and accountability of digital aggregators and global supply chains must be ensured. We have 3 papers on education and employment. Jimol Unni and Ravikiran Nayak talk about gender differences in returns to education mismatch. Ravi worked on NEET and gendered labor market exclusion of youth, and Jajati and Akanksha looked at low female work participation and economic growth penalty in India. In the context of education and employment, we know that education is a very important pathway for enabling women to enter the labor market and access better jobs. And we know that it's a pathway out of poverty as well. Returns to education depend on employment opportunities and matching education with jobs. The problem is that if you're overeducated for a particular job, that leads to an earnings penalty. And if you are undereducated for a particular job, that also comes with an earnings penalty. So being properly matched is extremely important. And analysis of NSS and PLFS data shows that women in the formal sector, informal employment in the formal sector grew. But as that happened, the proportion of adequately educated women fell. Worryingly, 1/4 of India's youth is neither in employment nor in education or training. And additionally, gender disparities are very high. At the national level, NEET rates for young females were 46.6% in 2004-05. They declined, but they remained high at 42% in 2022-23. There are spatial variations, with some states making improvements in NEET, others lagging behind. Reliance on unpaid and informal agricultural labor depresses productivity and undermines capital accumulation and risks turning our demographic dividend into a growth penalty. So policies must expand women's access to productive non-farm jobs and reduce barriers to their labor mobility. While industrial expansion is a critical driver of growth, service sector employment can also be growth enhancing. The right match between education and jobs is important. Relevant skill training, decreased burden of unpaid domestic and care work, increased access to education, job-linked skill training, and improved safety. Now, these are themes that are going to keep occurring and have occurred in several chapters. Policy must prioritize women's access to productive paid work beyond unpaid family labor, because what we are seeing as an increase in the PLFS data is by and large what was considered to be unpaid labor. Industrial development policies are essential given the consistently strong impact of industrial output on growth, but this requires targeted infrastructure, credit access, and technology diffusion to foster manufacturing competitiveness. Now, since service sector employment also shows strong potential in driving per capita GSDP, therefore, we need services that generate more formal, high productivity jobs through skills development, digital infrastructure, and regulatory reforms. The last set of papers, and this is the last set of 2 or 3 slides, is on policy issues that were raised by Deepa Sinha in the context of women's work and public employment, Elena Samantroy on ensuring social protection for women workers in India, policy perspective and way forward, and poverty, women and capability, where Kannan and Professor Kannan and Professor Ravindran looked at a study of the impact of Kerala's Kudumbushri system. In the context of policy perspectives, government services in key social sectors like education, health, and nutrition are important for reducing mortality and enabling better nutritional and learning outcomes. But public employment is a very important source of jobs for women, and it has narrower gender gaps in wages and better labor market outcomes. In the past, delivery of these services depended on regular cadres, like administrative staff at various levels, school teachers, nurses, A&Ms. But over time, there's been a shift from regular cadre-based appointments to contractual appointments, incentive-based workers, part-timers, etc. So expansion of honorarium-based frontline roles has led to feminization of these jobs or work, and concomitantly, wages are low, contracts are insecure. This has very long-term policy implications for the quality of employment that's available. Although PLF's data have depicted an increase in FWPR since 2017-18, the increase has mostly been in vulnerable employment without regular social protection. Because PLFS defines regular employees as all those who receive salary, wages on a regular basis, whether you're contractual or honorarium based, you get included in this category. The proportion of regular government employees with a written contract of 3 years duration has declined, and so has access to social security benefits. Several state governments have implemented cash transfer schemes for women that are aimed at enhancing financial security and well-being of women, with money being paid directly into bank accounts. There are several central government schemes also that provide financial support, for example, to pregnant and lactating mothers, to enable improvement in health and nutrition for the mother and child. But while cash transfer schemes are important, social protection measures that, while these are important social protection measures, there are many other challenges that are faced by women workers that also need to be addressed through implementing comprehensive, robust, universal social protection measures. So, there's no, this is really what is critical in the context of enabling care. Now, care provisioning must be central to the discourse on promoting universal social protection. And what we need is, as discussed already, so I won't reiterate all of this, but we need holistic, high quality, subsidized care for children, for elderly, for the ill, and for the disabled. The new labor codes have attempted to address some of the issues faced by women workers in accessing social security. However, challenges experienced by women within the informal sector deny them access to regular employment and universal and robust social security. And this is really what is critical and what we need. Existing labor legislation must be strengthened by aligning it with international standards while embedding social reproduction issues into the wider policy framework. This is essential for promoting a gender-inclusive workforce. The learning from Kudumbushri is that it's been able to play a catalytic role by enabling the poor to articulate their demands through group work, through mutual help, and providing a feeling of security. Hence, policies must strengthen the basic capabilities of the poor and vulnerable in India. That is the primary obligation of a developmental state, and higher educational attainment, along with a higher awareness of rights and entitlements, will act as a pressure and create effective political demand for more empowerment and participation of women in public affairs. Thank you very much for your patience and for not stopping me. And I did this in 5 minutes at ISLE. Thank you for letting me. Yeah, I'll be okay. So
Thank you so much, Professor Mehta, for so comprehensively presenting the highlights of the book. I'm sure this book will be a valuable resource for researchers, civil society organizations, development practitioners, and policy makers working on women's employment. Thank you so much. And now, the moment that we are waiting for, the official launch, the Delhi launch of this book. I request our moderator, the editors on the dais, the panelists, if they can kindly join, Professor Farzana Afridi, Ms. Renana Jhabwala, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Ms. Antli Rawat, Dr. Soumya Kapoor Mehta to please come on the dais for this launch, for the group photograph and all the contributors. Let's make a huddle here to launch this book. I request all of you, the contributors who are here. Devnathan sir, Govind ma'am. I can see Sona. Yes, we'll
और
give-
क्यों किताब लो भाई
yes. Bana sir, please come.
नीचे आ जाए हम लोग
Sir, नीचे भी आ सकते हैं.
हाँ नीचे आ जाइए
For the author, but for ceremony, for protocol.
Yeah.
Please.
आपने इतना टेप लगाया फर्स्ट में
ऊपर ही ठीक है
नहीं 2 रो कर लें
ठीक है ऊपर
ऊपर ही नहीं शर्मा जी आपको अलग भाई देसी
All the authors, please join on the stage. And of course, once they are all here, I invite Nupur Singh from Springer, the head of books, vice president books, to please come on the dais. She has been responsible for getting this book out in time. So, and Nupur is very apni Nupur. So please join us on the dais with our team. Huh? Folks, please. Come, Nupur. Come on the stage.
एक बुक को दे देना एक बुक की रैप नहीं है
Yes, please. It's all yours. Please come up. Now the photograph moment. Nupur, come in front. Sir, idhar aa jaiye. आइए sir.
They're taking from this.
आइए sir. Please come. Women and work in India, challenges, opportunities, and perspectives for policy. Yes, this does call for a round of applause. Edited by Professor Alakhen Sharma, Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta, Professor Vandana Upadhyay, with contributions from all the people who are standing here and many more who are joined us online, and published by Springer. Nupur is here representing Springer, the head of books here. So thank you so much. Calls for another big round of applause. Just an announcement, the contributors can collect their books if you have not got it yet from the counter outside. And for others, it will be available. Sir, apne paas rakhiye. It will be available at rupees 1,500, 1,600, I'm sorry. You can reach us at IHD anytime for the book. Bolo. Nupur wants to say something? No.
No, I just wanted to give some data. The book has already been downloaded in 17 countries so far and has received 1,600 downloads so far.
Congratulations to the team. Congratulations to the editors, and thank you, Nupur, for that valuable information. Can we put a...
Okay.
Yes. Sir, we'll need just 1 minute to
Yeah.
prepare the stage again.
See, I'm 1 second.
As we prepare the stage, we now move on to the next part of this event, which is a panel discussion on removing barriers, creating opportunities, strengthening women's access to quality jobs. The panel discussion is being moderated by Dr. A.K. Shivkumar, who is already gracing the dais. Thank you so much. The panelists in this session are Professor Farzana Afridi. She is a professor of economics at Indian Statistical Institute, leading economist working on public policy, labor markets, and women's economic empowerment. Request Farzana to please grace the dais. Ms. Renana Jhabwala from Seva Bharat, a Padma Shri awardee and former president of Seva Bharat, a pioneer in advancing the rights of informal women workers. Request you, ma'am, to please grace the dais. Dr. Rashmi Singh, Senior IS Officer and Secretary, Women and Child Development, known for transformative initiatives in women's empowerment. Request you, ma'am, to please grace the dais.
No,
She's also Secretary, Department of Art, Culture and Language in the Government of NCT of Delhi, and also holds charge as Chairperson of the Delhi Commission for Women and Delhi Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Ms. Anjali Rawat, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Labour and Employment. She has been contributing to India's employment and skills policy framework. Request you to please grace the dais. And finally, Dr. Soumya Kapoor Mehta.
Hi.
She's Senior Economist, World Bank, working extensively on gender, poverty, and social inclusion. Request you to please grace the dais. And now the reins of this panel discussion are in your hands, Dr. Shiv Kumar.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So thank you very much. We are about 15, 20 minutes delayed, but Asha, your presentation was really good and worthwhile because it's very unfair to compress such extraordinary amount of work in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So thank you for the presentation. Let me explain today's format or the panel discussion. I'll just take very few minutes to make some opening remarks. Then I'll invite the panelists. I think in the collective interest of time, we will all sacrifice 2-3 minutes each. So we were given, I was given 7 minutes or so. I'll confine my remarks to 4-5 minutes, and other panelists were given 8 minutes. If they confine themselves to 6 minutes, then we'll still be left with 20-25 minutes for question answers at the end. So that will be my request. And then we'll wrap up at around 7:45 with a vote of thanks by Professor Vandana Upadhyay. All right, so let me also begin by first congratulating the editors and contributors of this very important volume. I'm not at all surprised that there are already so many downloads. As we heard, the chapters span a wide range of issues from measurement, challenges, and time use studies to labor market transitions, discrimination, care penalties, and so on. But I think at the outset, it's important to remind ourselves that women's participation in economic activity is not only about labor markets. It is fundamentally about expanding women's freedoms and capabilities. Access to productive and meaningful work is central to women's agency, autonomy, and dignity. And countries that have expanded women's access to education and employment have not only experienced faster economic growth, but definitely better human development outcomes. So the question of women's work lies at the heart of India's development trajectory. One of the strengths of IHD is the very strong data and evidence they use in their analytical work. And I think the essays in this volume really exemplify that kind of numbers and statistics and what numbers tell us. But I also often make a comment that it's called a number because the function of a number is to numb you. So in that sense, when you are bombarded with so many numbers and statistics, you really don't know where to begin, what to do, how to start. So in that spirit, what I thought I'll do is to really synthesize this 5 or 6 elements of the dimensions of the presentation that stood out for me. The first and the most important one is the extraordinary heterogeneity of women's work in India. Women engage, as we found, in subsistence agriculture, informal services, home-based production, family enterprises, wage employment, and now increasingly in digital and platform-based work. The participation rates vary widely across states, social groups, rural and urban contexts. While recent estimates place female labor force participation, I think, at around 42%, it's well below the global average, and the national figure masks deep variations. So the first thing I picked up was there is no single story of women's work in India. The critical question is why? Why are female labor force participation rates low in different contexts? And I think everyone accepts that it is low, but why is it so? And the book, in fact, the terms they use says the discussion is not only marked by complexity and ambiguity, that's the terms that are used in this book, but at times by surprising evidence. And Asha showed us some where the survey results are so much at variance with each other. The second important point that came out for me was the structure of employment. India's labor market is overwhelmingly informal. and most women are working often in agriculture, domestic work, or small-scale self-employment. This creates a dual challenge. On the one hand, informal vulnerability implies low incomes, limited assets, and lack of social protection. But there are also persistent inequalities, even within formal employment, including wage gaps and occupational segregation. So one of the things that I picked up was that non-farm activities in urban areas appear to offer relatively better or higher wages for women. And so a question that arises is, as India urbanizes, and we might become, when the census comes out, we might be 45%, 40% urban, because the definition is fluid. The question is whether urbanization, whether these opportunities can support a shift towards more productive and better paying work for women. The third is the invisibility of women's work. I think Asha brought that out very, very strongly. How does one recognize and reconcile measurement of women's work in the best interests of women? And I think this is an ongoing challenge, and whatever you try to do, if you include unpaid economic activity as paid, then we are showing very high figures. But fundamentally, I think women's work is about paid employment. And I think only when women get money in their hands does it make that all the transformation in terms of women's agency, voice, dignity, and so on. So I think while in terms of measurement, it is important to recognize women's unpaid economic activity, we should also be focusing much more sharply on paid work for women and decent work for women. The fourth is the education employment paradox, which is really strange in India, that women who now account for nearly half of higher education enrollment, but this has not translated into significant employment gains. How do we address this issue? What kind of education expands capabilities? But they do expand capabilities, but without matching employment opportunities, these remain only partially realized. Fifth, this is the changing nature of work. I think IHT has done a lot of work in this area, the rise of platform work, digital technologies, and now artificial intelligence, all of which is reshaping labor markets. Would these create, by the way, I also want to add climate change is altering livelihoods, particularly in agriculture. Despite if agriculture becomes even more susceptible to weather changes, it is likely to accelerate migration to urban rural markets. While these could create new opportunities, how do we address concerns surrounding job security, earning stability, and social protection, especially for women? And last point I wanted to make, which I think the presentation, the book also doesn't touch upon, is the importance of women's health and nutrition. And I think it's known that high levels of anemia and undernutrition among Indian women limit their productivity and even earnings potential. So, and what is depressing is that the progress in reducing anemia and stunting among children, and girl children included, has been extremely slow. So these were some of the broad areas, but I think there's an even bigger problem which we must recognize, since I've taken it to a different India has been recording steady economic growth, but this growth has not been accompanied by an increase in employment and jobs. And it's not just for women, but for all men and women. It's a real crisis. This term that they use, jobless growth, is really characteristic of what India is experiencing and witnessing. And with all these uncertainties of AI displacing jobs, the future is very uncertain in terms of not just in terms of creating employment opportunities for everybody, and then seeing where women will fit into this. So let me stop. This was the backdrop. I thought that might be useful to the central question before the panel. How do we remove barriers and create opportunities for work for women to access quality jobs? I think it's a very important subject. So I look forward to the panel's insights on how we move this agenda forward. So let me begin by calling upon Dr. Farzana first to give her views. Farzana, you have a presentation, slides, yeah.
Okay, so I thought the best way of doing this is to just through data rather than through words. And my whole before I do any of that, first, congratulations to IHD and all the authors for coming out with this wonderful book. It's extremely comprehensive in terms of the issues that it's dealing with. And I'm not going to be able to do justice to all the topics that have been covered in the book. And my hope is, from the points that I'm bringing out over here, is to draw your attention or to move the discourse in one particular direction, which is away from uh, whether the question of whether women work or don't work to the quality of work that they're doing. And so I'm going to discuss some data and show you why this is an issue. And I want you to think about not the quality of work itself, but the kind of work or the situations that women are within the occupations. So there are substantive gender gaps that exist within occupations, whether we look at academia, whether we look at manufacturing sector, whether we look at services. And why I think that is important is that only when women who are already in the workforce do well in terms of getting parity with men, will it be attractive for women who are outside the labor force to enter, right? So they see the returns from entering into the labor force. So here, we were talking about, I'm just going to, show some data over here, which is what the book is talking about, but this is in a global perspective. So you have a bunch of countries, the red being the poor countries, the blue being middle income, and green being the developed countries. And India is amongst the blue, but what you see is India is, below that gray band over there. So basically, it means that given its log GDP, the GDP per capita of India, it should be higher up in terms of women's labor force participation. So even compared to other countries which are middle income countries, India's workforce participation of women is about 20 to 40 percentage points lower than it is in other such middle income countries. So that I classify as an opportunity for increasing women's participation. There's a significant gap that we want to address. But more importantly, what the book is bringing out very well in terms of trends is the opportunity for increasing women's work quality. So if you look at this map, again, this graph, what it's telling you is that as countries become more developed, okay, so you're going from the left-hand corner to the right-hand corner. So you're going from blue to red. The blue are the poor, the red are the rich countries. The proportion of the labor force, which is in salaried employment, increases as countries become more developed. And so where you see India is in the, the gray dot, and India is again, given its GDP per capita, the proportion of its workforce, which is in salaried employment, is below that of other comparable countries in terms of GDP per capita. So the issue is not that India is a poor country, that India is a low income country, and so we are doing poorly in terms of lots of people being in self-employment, but that relative to such other comparable countries also, we don't have enough formality in our labor force participation. So this is where I want to talk about work quality. So I think, as Dr. Shiv Kumar mentioned, the issue really should be about paid work, that whether women are being paid for the work that they are doing. And the issue is about formal work, the quality of work. And given that this is a concern for the country as a whole, it becomes a bigger concern for women because the gender gaps and the gender disparities that we see in the labor market are very large. And this is data from the ILO. So the blue line there is showing you the gender gap in the sense of men's wages being greater than women's wages. It's lower in developed countries, and the red line is developing countries. So these gender gaps in wages are higher in developing countries relative to developed countries. What is interesting is that it's going up over time. Now, what's happening in India? As the book points out, all of the increase that we've seen recently in women's work has been in self-employment. So let's not just talk about the fact that there's informality, but talk about the earnings. And what we are seeing is, again, the earnings gap within self-employment, within men and women doing the same kind of work. Women are getting less income than men are getting. This is some work that I'm doing in the manufacturing sector, which is looking at garment manufacturing. And typically you would think that garments, because you see a lot of women on the floor, on the stitching lines, you would think that we have resolved the problem of women's labor force participation. But this is data coming from just the stitching lines. And we look at wages of men and women who are on the operating lines. If we look at India, India's band is to the extreme right, which is that red line over there is the gender parity line. India is to the right, meaning that male stitching operators have higher earnings than female stitching operators within the country. We're looking across factories, across garment factories. So why I'm showing you these figures is to really, point out not just on the margin of formality versus informality. Again, this data is telling us that informality for women is increasing much faster, and for men, actually, it's been declining. This is just the PLFS data. But more importantly, even if they are already in the workforce, what is happening is that the kind of work that they're doing, whether it is in the aggregate or it is within occupation, that gap between men's and women's returns to work has not been addressed. And that is what I would term as quality, and where we need to sort of shift this discussion of just looking at the binary of whether women are working or not working, and measurement issues, which are extremely important. But at the end of the day, the paid work of women, whether they are doing productive work or not, becomes extremely important. So I'm just going to conclude with, some recent work, which is suggesting what are the ways in which we can support women's work quality. I think probably Renana is going to talk about it a lot more, which is access to credit and finance. So when we're looking at self-employment, given that most of the work that we are seeing that women are doing, the increase is happening as helpers in household enterprises. So this means that it's not just that they're helpers in household enterprises. Most of these enterprises, if you look at the ASU SE data, most of these enterprises are subsistence enterprises. They don't employ anyone. They just run from the household. They're not very productive. They're not using technology. They don't have access to credit and finance. And so when the household them itself as a collective is facing that issue, there's a double whammy for the woman. There is no attribution of income that is going to her. So what is it that we can do in terms of credit financing of these policies, which can increase women's entrepreneurship, which is not purely from a subsistence perspective, but hopefully which is much more productive work. Then on the skilling side, I think there is something that we've not paid attention to. So if you look at the periodic labor force survey data again, only 4% of India's labor force has formal skilling, that is certification. And the gender gap in any skills, any vocational skills, has increased between 2017 from about 8 percentage points to about 20 percentage points between men and women. So women are not enrolling into skilling programs or enrolling at lower rates, not completing the kinds of courses that are available. So there are many, many, many issues. And I think that speaks to also what we were talking about in terms of new technology coming in. Women have issues about access to technology, even if they have access, the usage of that technology, how to use it for productive purposes. So this is recent work that I've done where we worked with a skilling provider to design courses which were focused on digital and soft skills. And when we were collecting data on the ground, we asked women, if you have a mobile phone, what do you do with it? Is it 4 hours you're spending on the mobile phone? Most of the time women are saying they're watching YouTube or for entertainment, chatting purposes. What are the men doing? The proportion of time that they are spending for those purposes is much less. So they're using it for productive purposes, business purposes. Is it because women don't have work? These are all women who were registered for skilling. So it's also about using the technology in a way in which it increases your productivity and makes your work remunerative. Mobility is a big issue, and I would lump it all together with all the care work and the domestic work that women have to do, where mobility is a very holistic concept in terms of not just infrastructure, but also safety. So providing that public infrastructure which enables women to go from home to the workplace. And this speaks to, also this issue of skilling. One of the things we noticed is you provide these programs, but women are not going to take them up. Why? Because it is too far, for instance, right? It takes them away from home. Why is it that we have higher labor force participation rates in rural areas? Because my farm is next to my home. But when I'm in an urban area, my workplace is much further away, right? So you have to help me in terms of mobility to make it safer for me to get to work. And once I'm at work, then the workplace conditions matter. So again, this is coming from work that I've been doing with the manufacturing sector, with H&M, which is a big buyer in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and in India. And what we are realizing is that, again, when we're talking about occupational gaps within factories, within occupations, there is a need to enable women to progress not from jobs but also to careers, to make that long term investment, that this is not just something that I'm doing 2 days now and then I'm going to go back home and not do anything, right? So how do you help women think of the work that they're doing as career that helps them progress? And that requires importance in terms of not just legislation, but also this is both the public sector as well as the private sector, which has to be an enabler in terms of engaging women and ensuring that these disparities at the workplace, both in terms of work conditions and payments, are reduced, which would attract other women who are outside the workforce also to enter. So I'm just going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fazana. I think I'm living up to my reputation of being a terrible chair when it comes to timekeeping. That's okay. I'm just hoping for the day Dr. Alak Sharma says you'll no longer be called to chair any meeting. Okay, let's move now to Renana.
Okay, I think I'll have to shift this.
Yes.
That doesn't count in my 6 minutes.
No, I've not even started my clock.
I'd also like to add my congratulations. It's a wonderful book. As a discussant, I think Asha had sent it to me, and I, of course, couldn't read each and every word because it was online, but I did go through quite a bit of it. But I'm not going to address the question that you've asked me. I'm going to address a question that has really been bothering me and I think others. Is there a real increase in women's employment from 2018 to 2025, 24, 25? And my first thought was, has NSS changed its questionnaire? No, it hasn't. Has it changed its way of probing? I doubt it, but that somebody from NSS would be able to do. So I then thought, let me informally find out. Now, SEWA has a wide network. People have been working for many years. I asked many of them. And I'll just tell you what I heard. But it needs to be probed further. And I really think this is an important issue. First, in the urban areas. So there has been some increase in regular work in the urban areas. And that you do see. You do see girls in more shops, in the McDonald's and so on. So there has been some increase in the urban areas, which is very visible. And people say that it is visible. So I think that is a very real increase. One question that I've had is, domestic workers are also counted as regular salaried workers. But the numbers of domestic workers which are picked up by NSS are much, much lower than the actual number. Again, I had a study on that, which I won't go. But the real story is the rural areas. So has there been a big increase in the rural areas? And that is something that, if you look at, I didn't realize that Bihar was showing 17, 18. When we did the study with Rogers in 11, 12, it was showing 10%. So is it really possible that Bihar went from 4% labor force participation to, what was it, 32% in 6 years? No, it's not possible. And it isn't true also. So what's happening? I mean, the 4% was ridiculous, as was the 10% before. I don't know why Bihar that happened, but we noticed a number of things. One is that there has been a change in the assertion of women. So मैं कुछ भी नहीं करती हूँ has shifted to some extent. कि women are willing to say कि हाँ मैं खेत में काम करती हूँ. They are willing to say कि हाँ मैं घर में सिलाई करती हूँ. So I think that assertion has happened. So the thing that remained, that was work, and that Asha and all many people have documented again and again, never been listened to, was actually women are saying that. That's 1%, one observation. The second observation that I have heard from the ground and is that, this spread of SHGs and microfinance has created women doing very small types of work. And what we are seeing really is an increase in self-employment and unpaid family labor. So these are the two things. One, an assertion. So it's not more work, but talking about your work. And the second is there has been some increase. Whether that accounts for the whole thing or not, I don't know. I don't think so, actually. Though I want to say about the increase, we did quite a bit of study from the Axios survey. And what we found was that 70% of women who say that they are self-employed are earning, have turnovers of less than 1 lakh per year, which is less than 1 lakh, which is about what, 9,000, 8,500 per month. So if you have a turnover of 8,500 per month, what are you earning from it? 4,000. And I think that's what the PLFS shows anyway. And what we are calling self-employment is very often disguised wage labor. It's not really enterprises. These are disguised wage labor. I think somebody mentioned, Asha mentioned home-based workers. It's usually a contractor will give some work. She sews so many petticoats for so much money and then gives it back and gets per dozen petticoats so much. So that's just disguised wage labor. It's nothing more. So of these 67% women who are doing enterprises, actually, how many of them are really self-employed? That's something that needs to be worked out. And if you want to increase women's enterprises, then you really have to shift away from those who are disguised wage labor to those, separate the disguised wage labor and have social security measures and negotiations and minimum wages. But for the ones which are actually small enterprises, there's a whole package of things that need to be done. In fact, I'm just coming from another conference which partly Seva was organizing on women entrepreneurs and what one can do. And there's a whole network on that. So I think in 4 minutes, I can't do that. But I think that's something that needs to be looked at, this increase in self-employment, which has come from the microfinance and the SDGs and so on. How many of those are really enterprises? And quite a few are. And then how do you increase that, how do you help the growth of those enterprises? The second thing I wanted to say, and then I will end, is on urban. And the increase in the formal employment, or rather the regular employment, is of younger people. And my experience there is that although education has gone way up, employment obviously hasn't matched that. And there are many barriers. The home is one of the biggest barriers. कि लड़की को बाहर नहीं जाना चाहिए, बहुत दूर नहीं जाना चाहिए, नौकरी में नहीं जाना चाहिए, and so on. So I think that's one very major thing. So, we do say beti bachao, beti padhao, but we don't say beti kamao. So that lack is there. And the other is, the after getting educated, what kind of things are girls looking for? Ki hum office mein baithenge and we will do computer or we will sit in the office. And even if they do sit in the office, they don't understand what kind of work is required. So the education and the employment, the kind of education they get and the kind of aspirations they get from that education and the kind of employment that is available are two completely different things. And that gap needs to be bridged. So I think I just end there. But I do think, we really need to find out what this big increase is.
Thank you so much, Dhananand. Thank you. I'll now move to the next panelist, Dr. Rashmi Singh.
Sure. So, first of all, let me confess that not read the book, but very important to, get the nuances from what Asha Kapoorji presented to be able to have a very good insight into the subject, which was very, very holistic and with the kind of chapters written. So, the first speaker in the panel said that, data, it's, it's moving from words to data, but I would say moving from words to data to action. Yeah, so it's, so that kind of practitioner's insight which I have today over the years that I have been working with the sector, especially, to do with, the change in the narrative starting from the women welfare to empowerment to women in development to now the discourse of women-led development. So this narrative change is happening. It is real. I mean, let's kind of face it. And what is very important in terms of the policy, that the shift that's happening is more of, I think, gender perspective that's happening with, somewhat of a competition also in many of the states. I find that, there's a, kind of race for looking at how many Lakpati Didis are being created. Yeah, so the self-help group, I agree with Renana ji that it's not like when we look at the typical, the microfinance in terms of also, creation into enterprise and, how much was used actually for conspicuous consumption and enterprise and business and, what turnover. So even today, we would be, in many ways, at an aspirational stage. At the same time, what is very important that I'm looking at a huge opportunity in terms of the social capital being created, which I think addresses the first barrier to workforce participation as far as women is concerned. Because I think also in the book you mention about this, this network of social capital and, the group activity. And you took the example of Kudumshri, which is like when we look at like Keral Kudumshri, what it is telling us also is that very early they had taken the social capital thing very, very seriously, and which actually gave lots and lots of opportunities to women in sectors which was coming from the government procurement policies to be oriented towards positive discrimination for women and women self-help group. And that is another reality which I think that the moment we are poised today across many states to look at these like huge network of women. So now there is an opening across sectors to look at government owned contracts, tenders, where women can take part. I'll give an example like canteens being run by women. Now it's I remember the time when in Delhi government secretariat when the space was like out to be tendered out, and we said that no women self-help group, and Istri Shakti was the name of the organization, that they could run it. And so we had a very limited kind of competition amongst these groups. And even today, they continue, 10 years down the line, and they continue running the canteen very, very successfully and creating such a niche that many other states and many other, sector organizations, they came forward. Similarly, when look at the openings which are coming forward for women in, like, say, non-farm sector and across the different departments, the agribusiness, the value change which is happening in even in a place like Jammu and Kashmir. I thought that, women are coming forward to make use of these opportunities. So let's like strengthen this momentum, which is very important today. We know that training is important, skilling is important, but the fact that there is a public infrastructure which today we are talking about to create a level playing field. And in that public infrastructure, of course, safe mobility, but the mobility as a whole. I mean, even before the safe mobility, the end-to-end connect. So that itself was a huge issue. So that connect, that mobility, that uh, is adding to the ease of women coming out. And number two is things like having public toilets. I think huge issue. Things like having, maybe in places now with the, courts also talking about like feeding station for women, for nursing mothers. So, there's a gender perspective being built into, I would say that entire notion of creating a smart city. A smart city has to be gender friendly. It has to be gender sensitive. So there I find that the opportunity today of like having more women to take part in the workforce, which I'm witnessing as a practitioner. This today itself, if I just like, I mean, if you allow me to just talk about, because tomorrow probably it's going to be out in the paper that, we signed some MOU with Swiggy saying that, we'll come and talk to the women at a Anganwadi. Now, Anganwadi becoming an entry point where we are offering, many kind of diversified job opportunities, which are likely. So, probably looking at these new entry points, where it was difficult to reach out in terms of, the demand and the supply for bigger platforms. It's difficult to reach women at the grassroots. We, as the government service, provider in through the Anganwadi setup, if we can enable that access. So this I found in, something like, okay, Swiggy coming forward or many other, we had a tie-up with a skill and entrepreneurship university recently. And out of the 300 women who went through training in terms of digital literacy, financial literacy, making of a business plan, there were 75 role models today who were brought before me. That they are women who can now handhold others. So that mentorship also. Somewhere I thought that in the book, I did not see that word in the chapters, that hand holding, that mentorship. There's aspiration. When we talk about like also public infrastructure, the more women coming out with the demand for more creches has actually led to more creches happening in the government scheme itself. With Delhi having seen in the last few months, we tried with converting many of our Anganwadis into Anganwadi cum creches. So I think that demand is important. And I tell you, within few months, we have 5,000 children today who have got enrolled in our creches. Yeah, in my period that I saw after coming back from Jammu and Kashmir, which is so, I think, important again, that let us also, build these, different areas, avenues which are opening up, and then see what effect it is happening. Maybe in Delhi, is it happening at the scale at which it is needed? So today, probably, I don't know in what area I need to open these creches. So the research today also needs to tell us the specific requirements, specific zones. So there, I think we map to, the need for data in a more disaggregated way, in a more like informed real-time basis, so that it can inform my decision as a practitioner that where is more crash needed. So those are also certain things that we need to probably respond to. And also health and nutrition. I just wanted to add one more thing, the last point probably, that the interpolability. Yeah, we the for example, because you spoke about health and nutrition, and again, Anganwadi services, very important for, say, women who come as a seasonal migrant category for work, in a place like Delhi. So they can still register themselves in the Anganwadis, and they can have the children put in the Anganwadis with the nutrition entitlement, which in other state, once they go back, they're still entitled, because there is a transfer happening. But probably not many, not fully are availing it, because the system is there, the portion tracker is there, through which this transfer is taking place, but the opportunities are not being fully utilized. So I think there again we need to see that where is that gap between the service provisioning happening and the access. Thank you.
Thanks. Sriram. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Let me first begin by congratulating Professor Alakan Sharma, Professor Asta Kapoor Mehta, and Professor Vanna Upadhyay, along with all the contributing authors, for bringing out this important volume on women and work in India. I had a long set of initiatives which Government of India has been taking to increase the female labor force participation. But lot has been said since past 1 hour on the data statistics. So I thought I'll drop it and I change the way I would speak today. So I'll just try and focus on few important initiatives which Ministry of Labor and Employment is taking up to increase the female labor participation. So we have formulated a task force which involves all our industry partners, UNICEF, ILO, UNICEF Yuva, and other important organizations, along with various ministries which work together on the important thematic areas where we need an intervention for increasing the female labor force, like care ecosystem, or safe and equitable workplaces, future of work, AI, digital. So these are the thematic areas wherein this task force is looking into. And we are working on the initiatives which are short-term, mid-term, and long-term in order to increase the female labor force participation, which we anticipate should be 70% by 2047. So again, statistics, but that is the vision of Viksit Bharat. Along with that, India is holding the BRICS presidency this year, and one of the important initiatives, priority areas that is being discussed between the member states is on the increasing the female participation, labor force participation. So we have been hearing all the countries, and through mutual exchange of ideas and the efforts which different countries are making, we'll be able to work more closely with them, and with more of research and understanding, we'll be able to build our frameworks. Other than that, Ministry of Labor and Employment is also having a National Career Service Portal, which is a one-stop solution for all the career-related services, which is open to everyone. So it is not gender-specific. But why I'm mentioning here specifically is that we are sensitizing women to be the part of this National Career Service Portal. We have been running a lot of sensitization workshops, and this NCS portal is also linked with eShram portal. So eShram is the largest database for the unorganized sector, and around 55+% of women are on the unorganized sector are on the eShram. And when the eShram and the NCS portal are connected, a woman coming on the eShram can go towards formalization because job opportunities are available on the NCS portal. So this divergence from this shift from the informality and the formality is being managed through the digital interventions with Ministry of Labor and Employment is taking up. Along with that, we are also working towards international labor mobility. So again, along with the Ministry of External Affairs and our recruiting agents, we are working towards safe, movement of labor across the countries. So definitely there is a lot of demand of women nurses abroad. So we are promoting that idea and we are providing them with the safe pathway of getting into other countries. Since we have the youngest workforce, therefore the demand from India is very high. In terms of care, nursing sector, it is very huge. If we talk about labor codes, which have already been mentioned by a few of the earlier speakers, so the 29 acts have been merged into 4 important codes, that is Code on Social Security, Wages, Industrial Relations, and Occupational Safety and Health Working Conditions. So this allows, in the OSH code, the night shifts have been allowed for the women from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., provided they give us consent. Employers should provide safe working conditions, adequate transport facilities, and proper security measures. Similarly, they should provide them with separate restrooms, washrooms. So a lot of details are available, a lot of literature is available in the public domain. On this. On equal opportunity, the code emphasizes on non-discrimination, providing equal opportunity to everyone. Under Social Security Code, maternity benefits, childcare facilities, job security, access to Social Security. So that is 26 weeks of paid maternity leaves. Establishment with 50 and more employees should provide cash facilities, flexible working arrangements. So everything has been taken care in the courts which have been recently approved, and we are expecting them to be out soon. Other than that, as I was mentioning, the National Career Service Portal and the eShram portal, the Ministry of Skill and Entrepreneurship is also working towards Skill India Digital Hub. They already have that, so which has verified credentials, and a lot of training courses are available. So NCS, eShram, and SID are all interoperable and they are API connected. So if an individual from the SID platform wants to come on NCS, they can see a job. Any women-specific courses, if they want to take any course from the SID portal, they can register. So all these systems are integrated. So we are working towards digital public infrastructure, and we are offering this infrastructure to different countries as well. So these are, in short, a lot of initiatives that Ministry of Labor and Employment is doing, and definitely we are also working closely with the gig and platform workers. In the recent budget announcement, the PMJ scheme is to be given to these platform workers. We are working towards that, and the Ministry of Labor and Employment is focused on increasing the female labor force. The question on the methodology with which NSSO is using, that is a debatable question, so I would not be able to speak anything on that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Come to the last panelist, Soumya.
Thank you, Shiv, and thank you so much, Asha ji and Alak ji, for inviting me to this. I remember Asha ji had asked me if I could write a paper actually for this volume, and she said, "Come to Itanagar. First, send me an excerpt." And I said, "I can't, I'm too stretched." She said, "Well, at least don't write a paper, come." I couldn't manage that as well, but I managed to secure a spot as a panelist. So I'm very proud of myself I'm still here. And I was thinking to myself when Alak ji said that there'll be 3 publications out this year from IHT. If anybody can do it in the academic world, it's only Alak ji, to get 3 books out in 1 year. So really looking forward to reading my volume, and also congratulations. It's really a very rich set of primary work, which is very hard to come by these days. So congratulations to all the contributors. Just to reflect, I mean, 2 or 3 top reflections that, I skimmed through the book, like Renana Ben Ashaji had shared it with me. And the first thing was also the reflection that Renana Ben had, like why are women in agriculture? And there was another report that was released this morning, which was on the state of working India, and which has a very stunning, fascinating statistic that in the past 2-3 years, about 80 million jobs have been created, of which 40 million have been in agriculture, and 38 million of that 40 million have been taken up by women. Now, we do not know why women are in agriculture. I can speculate that it could also be in the past 2-3 years that men actually went back to the cities after COVID. It could be that women who were probably already working and were unpaid but at the same time, were the farming hands went back to agriculture much more, and that has also accounted for the uptick. It could also be that honestly, the non-farm jobs, despite the spread of the self-help movement, are hard to come by. So agriculture becomes a resort because it's also very close to your home. And that's why that's the difference also between rural and urban. In urban, you don't get as many opportunities, which would allow you the flexibility to take your child to the place where you're working, to work from within the house, to tend to your livestock and also tend to your child and do the domestic chores simultaneously. The other sort of reflection that I thought which was very fascinating was that young people, of course, and that was also something that came out in the earlier sort of report release, that younger women, despite education, actually are unemployed, and that's the education unemployment paradox. But that I think holds for men as well. You these days education does not really secure you a job, but I think it could also be aspirational. Again, something that Renana Ben was saying, and it takes me back to a conversation, incidentally, Renana Ben, that I had with some Seva workers in Indore. And I remember they were working on textiles, on petticoats, piece rate workers, and they were rolling pappers. And their daughters were educated, but the aspiration was, you are not going to do this job. It's also, some social norms around, trying to come back home on time. You're also going to be married soon. So you already start restricting yourself on the kind of jobs that you want to take up, which would probably be befitting the kind of education you've done. And you can do this job, but, as a mother, I would prefer that you don't do this job that I have been doing. So I think a lot of that starts explaining the kind of structural constraints that still explain the paradox of low labor force participation in India. And I always used to find somebody who said it, I don't know which person in a conference, that the biggest story of labor market differences between men and women in India does not play out within the labor market. It plays out outside the labor market in the homes, in the kind of work distribution that happens, not just on care duties, but also on domestic work. So if you are actually preparing and cooking and cleaning, then you may not have time left, and you have to manage all of these things together with your work. So the kind of work that you apply for is also restricted. And I think the aspirations for boys and girls, again, some of the interviews that we have done through World Bank education projects are still different. So you would send your girl to engineering, but you would say, why do you want to do civil engineering? Because once you are doing civil engineering, you will be on a work site and it's going to be unsafe. So unless you get computer engineering, for which I need to be really the brightest to be able to secure that particular course, I may not end up doing engineering. So a lot of those constraints also play out, and the students tell us that, our brothers are allowed to do, chemical or civil, but we may not be able to take up that course. And, eventually, therefore, we don't get that kind of jobs that we want. I think the third thing was also on marriage, and Farzana makes this point in quite a few of her papers, that, the way younger people get educated, the age of marriage in India is still relatively low compared to other countries. So the age of entry into the labor market for a woman is around the same time that she's getting married. It's around the same time that she is migrating to a new place. Who knows what networks we are going to have in that place, and who knows what kind of jobs that we're going to land up there. So I think those were the 2 or 3 insights that I took away. And in terms of the policy, I think on the work that we've been doing in the World Bank, there's a lot of emphasis on the PM Setu program, which is really revamping the ITIs. I think it's a great program. We are trying to incentivize this hub and spoke approach to say, eventually the ITIs need to be integrated with the private sector. We really need to respond to the skill gaps that the private sector needs. So, and we should set up those ITIs around those manufacturing hubs, because otherwise, these kids will pass out, but they will have no jobs to go to. But at the same time, the kind of ITI's support that needs to be done is coming up now, because actually there are plenty of ITIs, but they're all private. So the state is recognizing that it needs to invest in skilling in a much more formal way. The second is on finance. I think on finance, the issue is probably not as much of access to loans, but working capital. And I think there too, the Ministry of MSME is trying to, through the TREADS platform, trying to put in receivable finance, try and document and make your MSME much more formal. So you get more receivable, more receipts and, payments and credits. So you would be able to get working capital. And I think the third thing is really on care. Now, there I have a challenge in terms of the Anganwadis now being, of course, asked to do 0 to 3, because that's where the break comes. The moment I have a kid, I need to get out of the workforce. So let's ask the Anganwadi workers to take care of 0 to 3-year-olds, which they weren't doing. They were doing 3 to 6. But a lot of the interviews, at least that I have done with Anganwadi workers, say they are not prepared for it. They're used to a particular hour. They need to now extend their hours till 5 p.m. till the working mothers come back, and they are already overburdened and they're not salaried. So how do you, get in more? The infrastructure is there, the Anganwadi is there, not in urban areas, which is also an important constraint because you don't have that care infrastructure. So I'll just stop there, but congratulations. And Alakji, I can't wait for you to invite me to the other book launches as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Soumya. Thank you to all the panelists. We're coming to the end. It's already 7:43, but I think I'll still open the floor for some comments, questions. Please keep them brief, and then I'll give an opportunity to the panelists to react. Yes, sir.
Kulshrestha, you know me? Yeah. I'm Kulshrestha. I'm not an economist. I'm a statistician, not even a statistician. I'm a national accountant. And I used to work more than 1 decade as head of the national accounts. And it was just answering, not answering, commenting on what Nanaji said. I think it was 1996 that I wrote a paper published in EPW. It was the gender in GDP. GDP is a gender-free animal. It doesn't have any role of it. But thinking that the GDP will have a bigger component of the compensation, and in compensation, both genders or all genders would be there, I attempted that paper. It was quite interesting, I think well taken. 30 years ago. Then I thought the point with Niranaji said that what is happening? Is there any improvement or deterioration, or we are just talking purely from statistics point of view?
So can you just give?
Yeah,
ask
so
the
after
question?
20 years, I updated that paper and we found some kind of changes which occurred on that. Oh, that was in a published paper.
Thank you, sir.
And then I wrote a book also, a co-authored a book that has come in 20, but not anything is included in this book.
No, I think you have to.
Okay.
We know that you're a very distinguished.
So thank you
scholar,
very much.
But we need to know what your comments are on the presentation. Thank you. Yes, please, at the back. Pichu, aapke piche.
First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists. It was very insightful. I am curious about one thing, though I am curious about a lot of things, but I'll just restrict to myself to one question. First of all, I think one thing we missed in this discussion is the impact of climate change and how it is going to impact on women and work, because we are talking about that, women, female labor force participation in rural areas have increased. Maybe this is because of climate change is happening, and now the farm output have decreased, so men have to migrate to urban cities. So female now they have to suffer double burden syndrome. So what we can do about it, as ma'am also highlighted, that maybe this data is inflated, so how we can actually know the true picture that what things are happening.
Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, you have the mic, so you go ahead first and then.
Let me first congratulate ISD. I have always been an admirer of ISD's work on gender. even first publication which came in 2004 or 5. It was excellent, and it is continuing its journey. My comment here is that possibly we also need to look into how the future of work will be impacting the gender in the labor market. The way climate change, many people have said, technical changes and other changes that are happening, the structural transformation that is happening in the labor market. How is it going to impact, and how prepared we are for those, future of work and women? Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to you, there are some people online, and there is one question from Alia Khan. This is for the panel. Is there evidence of transition towards formality, which means including workers getting maternal benefits, healthcare benefits, old age pensions in trends of paid employment? So I'll park that question. Alia Khan is from Pakistan. Thank you. Thank you so much for that question. The panelists will address it once we hear the last question.
I will keep it just brief
Yes, please.
to
Thank you.
Dr. Rashmi Singh. So you talked about demand-driven, crashes. So particularly, we have just seen the picture that, if we stick to the principal status, the work participation of women is very low. And if you look at particularly urban also, then how is this women being, a smaller proportion of the workplaces, how that is going to lead to demand-driven crashing. Second quick question, Dr. Farzana. So some of the papers I reviewed have observed that the infrastructure in terms of road construction has not increased women's employment or income, but it has improved their decision-making power within the household. So what kind of employment, what kind of strategies would be important in this respect? And just a quick question, in terms of skilling and vocational training, so this is mostly focused on those who are in late 20s coming out of, doing their graduation or school. What about those who are older, women?
Thank
So
you.
are there any focus programs?
Thank you. I'm afraid I'm
Thank
going
you.
to stop questions now, and sure. Before we don't have any extinguisher here.
So burning.
Thank you. Thank you
Please
so much.
identify yourself.
Without losing any more time, I think I'm sort of addressing the elephant in the room, which is the feminization of labor and what bearing it has on the female labor force participation, on the gender-based occupational segregation, case in point also being domestic workers. Yeah, so that.
Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to go through the panelists, whoever wants to answer questions. Let me start with Renana.
I don't have an answer. I read Dr. Kulshesh's paper
But that,
so many years ago, but I don't have an answer.
but he also didn't have a question. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take the crash one, yeah, because the demand driven and matching the demand and the supply, it actually needs more informed decision, I said, based on ground level data. Now, in this particular case, it's like a catch-22, because if you go by number of working women and then you decide to give a crash, where there are more number of working women, then you'd miss out on those who were actually looking for going to work if they had this kind of a care setup. So again, the way we have spoken about the right set of question being asked, that is so critical important, because we are not being able to capture women's work fully, because probably it's not fully monetized. So you're not capturing it. Similar thing about the crash. So that so the demand and supply, to be able to do it in a very, very, I would say, customized, localized, contextualized manner. Very important that, we have this, the field knowledge of the area, that so-and-so's vulnerability, if it is reduced, then the work participation would be more. So as an answer to this, we have made our creches more flexible. It is meant for working women, but we have actually, liberalized it, that if it is a home-based work and a woman still wants to send her child to the creche, we'll welcome the child. Thank you.
Thank you. Anjali, ma'am.
I would like to
answer this question?
Yeah, but
Okay.
not completely.
No, no.
Partly I'll try. So the question is there evidence of transition towards formality, maternity benefits, medical care benefits, old age pensions in trends of paid employment? I'll not be able to completely answer this question, but if I look towards the formalization, then we have our digital systems in place wherein we have few social security schemes which are mapped in the system itself. So we have a basic idea of what is the formality shift. So we have gender-wise bifurcation of data, we have scheme-specific data available. But that would be only part information. If we go towards maternity benefits, medical care benefits, in case those schemes are in the system, then we'll be able to manage. Otherwise, there are different ministries which are capturing data on different platforms. Thank you. If anyone
you.
wants to add
No,
to the answer of this question.
Soumya?
I can take the climate change one. Definitely, there'll be a huge impact. And I think we speak a lot about mitigation, so moving away to, moving towards renewables and, the other larger sort of ways to, prevent the adverse effects of climate change. But adaptation is going to be crucial. And as far as adaptation is concerned, rural women in India are going to be key to the way we adapt to climate change because they are the ones who are in the forefront.
Farzana?
Yeah, I think that both the questions on roads and the other one on climate. So you have ICRISAT data. I don't know if you've looked at that. So that's not your PLFS and NSS, which gives you plot level data on households participation and breakup by labor contribution of women, all members of the household. And we use that data, which is a panel, and look at how climate change has affected the contribution of women and men. And what we see essentially is what you're saying, which is as the productivity of the farm goes down, the men move out and the women stay on the farm. And that speaks to your issue about roads. But roads leading to where? If there are no jobs for women, then they're just staying back. And essentially what we point out is that if there are no alternative opportunities available for women, they're just going to stay back in agriculture, where the productivity is falling further and gender gaps in terms of remuneration is going up.
Thank you. So I think I'm good. I'm not trying to sum up or anything. We're over time, but I must thank the panelists for a very rich discussion. And I think the kinds of issues that have been raised are issues that should be of great concern as India talks about becoming Viksit Bharat in 2047. And for me, one of the targets has to be to reduce this degree of informality. I mean, if 85% or 90% of the workforce is in the informal sector, do we even have a goal that by 2047, we will reduce it to 40 or 50%? And I think that is a very critical question. But it also brings out several other issues that were talked about in terms of what is the real story. And the story in different contexts, different geographies, different caste, religion, many things have to be factored into this discussion. I loved Renana's Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, Beti Kamao. And I think that Beti Kamao is the crux, is really the crux of the thing.
Another conversation. Beti Kamao was reduce the. Okay, so that's Hindi term will become.
No, it's not. Kamao is not a, please. maybe, no.
Is it written Kamao se kami reduce?
Yeah.
No, I'm just putting.
Yeah. So, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Farzana also makes a very important point about the quality of work. Both in terms of when you talk about self-employment, which seems to be the gender gaps are really striking over there, and skilling, what kind of skilling do you need, etc. So I think many issues were raised. I think Soumya talked a lot about all dressed up but nowhere to go. This is another syndrome, because many young women are educated, they've done school and college, and there are no jobs. And as Farzana also said, the jobs have to be near you, or if there is mobility, then there has to be safety while traveling and at the workplace. And so there are lots of constraints that really are operating besides talking about access to markets and credits and strengthening entrepreneurship and improved skilling and so on and so forth. I was quite impressed by what Rashmi ji said and Anjali ji said on government efforts, because central to the future of women's work is the role of the state in providing decent care services. And on care, I want to just explain that, with fertility rates dropping so dramatically, even the rural TFR is below the replacement rate. I think the number of children you have is part of the problem, but the fewer children you have, it opens up opportunities for women to enter the workforce, which is the paradox of our situation, that women are not getting jobs in the workforce, even though the fertility rates are so low. But in addition to providing for children, I think the geriatric care or old age care is really going to become the major challenge for women at home. That yes, the children are fine, they're going to school, etc. But taking care of elderly in-laws or elderly parents is a full-time job. And so that is, I think, the worrying part of Rashmi ji in terms of that. So one second, no. Afterwards, because people are getting impatient.
Something.
It's okay. Please go ahead.
Look at the emerging opportunity in terms of the number of service, in terms of the service sector. The emerging job opportunities, say like geriatric care, like offering job opportunities. So when we talk about skilling, so again that match between the demand and the supply, that more of skilling needed in these sectors. That's it.
50 years down, you will not have people to take care who are reducing today the tier.
Yeah.
Their care would be today, of course, it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
There it will be.
We have Rama Bijapurkar, she sent a comment here saying that as family income increases, do women drop out of the workforce? And are they doing this out of choice or to improve what they think is better practices at home and so on and so forth? So I think young couples do have a lot of pressure on them, both in terms of the cost of bringing up children and other issues. So I think let me end by saying that yes, we a forward-looking agenda. We need universal access to quality childcare, old age care, better skilling, better mobility and safety, jobs nearer home, and so on and so forth. And so as we plan for the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, we really need to recognize the heterogeneity of women's work. We all say rural women, but that rural women is a very, very broad category. So the more granular we get, and that's what Rashmi ji was saying, that we really need granular contextual data and real-time data to shape programs and guide policy. And I think that's where we need to go. So thank you very much for being so patient. And thank you for the panelists.
Thank you.
Fantastic effort has been made to produce this volume, and I'd strongly recommend that you download it, buy it, and read it. And it's really worthwhile keeping it with you as a record. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiv Kumar. And it is now time for the vote of thanks. I invite Professor Vandana Upadhyay from Rajiv Gandhi University to propose the vote of thanks.
A very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the Center for Development Studies and the Women Studies and Research Center, Rajiv Gandhi University, Arunachal Pradesh, and the Institute for Human Development, New Delhi, it is my proud privilege to propose the vote of thanks to the august gathering assembled here. We are indeed honored to have you here for the launch of our book, Women and Work in India, Challenges and Opportunities and Perspective for Policy. This book is the outcome of our collective endeavor, and it is a matter of great pride and satisfaction that it was discussed today by an eminent panel of scholars and policy practitioners under the theme Removing Barriers, Creating Opportunities, Strengthening Women's Access to Quality Jobs. Our sincere thanks to Dr. A.K. Shivkumar, the moderator of the panel, for his outstanding role in taking forward this program to its logical conclusion. Thank you so much, sir. Our deepest gratitude to the esteemed members of the panel, Dr. Farzana Afridi, Professor of Economics, Indian Statistical Institute, Delhi, Ms. Renana Jebawala, President, Seva, Bharat, Ms. Anjali Rawat, DDG at the Ministry of Labour and Employment, Government of India, Dr. Rashmi Singh, Secretary at the Department of Women and Child Development, Government of NCT of Delhi, Dr. Soumya Kapoor Mehta, Senior Economist, India Country Office, World Bank, for their participation in this thought-provoking panel discussion and for offering brilliant perspective on the subject of the discussion. Needless to say, we are so much better informed on this very important subject. Thank you very much. I'll be failing in my duty if I do not highlight the tireless efforts of my colleagues in IHT, Professor Alak Narayan Sharma, Professor Asha Kapoor Mehta, Ms. Priyanka Tyagi and her team, and all my colleagues at Rajiv Gandhi University, my former Vice Chancellor, Professor Kushwaha, and my current Vice Chancellor, Professor S.K. Nayak, and all my colleagues in the Department of Economics, Rajiv Gandhi University. A big thank you to all the contributors of this edited volume. It requires a lot of behind-the-scene efforts to put together an event of this type. A special thank you to the publisher Springer and to Ms. Nupur Singh for the timely publication of this book. We all know it is a mammoth task to put together a book and even bigger challenge to publish it on time. Thank you so much, Nupur. Thank you to all my dear colleagues. Last but not the least, a big thank you to the attentive audience for your presence and for your proactive participation. But for your participation, the event would not have been a success. Your valued presence and participation is greatly appreciated. A big thank you to all of you.
A time for a group photograph. This brings us to the end of this event. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. And thank you to all the people on the dais for making this so engaging and enriching. Announcement, the book is available with us at the cost of ₹1,600. You can place your orders to IHD, mail@ihdindia.org, or can write to Springer for ordering the book. Thank you so much. This brings us to the end of this event.